Hello and welcome back to Raw 12:51 AM with your head of sport, Will Kingswood, as we are diving into another episode of Raw Sport Interviews. Obviously, it's our Women's Week coverage for this week, so I thought that we get on a sport and a person that hasn't really been covered that much this year, that being cricket. Obviously, we've just finished the men's Ashes, the woeful performance from the England team, 4-0. Loss, should have been 5 probably without the rain. But women's Ashes coming up. Hopefully we can do better. And I thought I'd bring on the women's president or the president of women's cricket at Warwick, Evie Ashton, to talk about women's cricket at Warwick on the wider level and obviously do a bit of a preview for the women's Ashes. So let me introduce her. How are you doing, Evie?
Yeah, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to be back interviewing people. I haven't done much of it. And I mean, we'll just get straight into it. So, how did you get into cricket in the first place? Because I know obviously everyone at school, we've all got those sports. We've got the footballs, the rugby, maybe the athletics. But cricket, I guess, maybe less so, maybe more so at grammar schools, which is what I went to. But other than that, cricket, maybe not one of those more common ones. How did you sort of get into it?
Yeah, so I didn't get into it at school because unfortunately we didn't get taught it in PE. So actually in 2019, there was the Men's World Cup. I'm sure you watched it. It was such a good match. But yeah, I watched the final. And then I was like, damn, that's super over. That was incredible. I must play cricket now. And then it was the Wimbledon final on the same day. And I think the F1 as well. It's 3 screens.
Yeah, no, I remember that. I think I was watching the F1 in one room and then moved to the tennis and the cricket. It was an insane day of sport.
Yeah, it was such a good day. And just seeing how thrilling cricket can be, I was like, oh, this seems cool. I want to pick it up. If men can do it, there must be a women's game, right? And then, although to be fair, the pandemic hit. But in the summer, I picked up softball cricket. I haven't actually been playing that long at all, only a couple of years, but I have become quite obsessed with it. But yeah, I picked up softball, which is sort of a beginner's and way route into cricket. Liked it quite a lot. And I play tennis as well. So it was it was a bit more natural because it's similar, sort of holding a bat and ball, hand-eye coordination kind of thing. But yeah, really enjoyed it. And then came to uni, really got into it because joined women's cricket. Everyone was so lovely, so welcoming, loved the club. And then I just started to research beyond the club itself and just, following women's cricket on TV, on Twitter. And then that's pretty much up to where I am now. Started writing about it and quite a cricket badger now. Yeah,
and I mean, you've become president now. So obviously, first year is sort of both of us. I mean, we're both second years now. So first year is a bit curtailed by COVID. So how did you sort of decide that you wanted to become the president and then sort of going for it and eventually getting it?
Well, I suppose there was a period of time once I joined the club that I became really invested in. Because I was playing it, I wanted to also watch it, which I think is quite a natural thing. So got really into keeping up to date with who was playing, next match, all the fixtures, blah, blah, blah. And then realised that there's a lot of inequality, lack of diversity in cricket as a whole, and just the fact that the women's side of it gets a disproportionate amount of investment. It's not got really equal coverage. Just the fact that not equal in a lot of ways to the men. Yeah. And I found that quite an injustice. So part of me just felt motivated. If I can help grow women's cricket at Warwick, then that's my contribution somehow at university. I felt like that was how I could best use my skills in a way.
Yeah.
Because I like sport, and then I've done so much research about it. I thought I'd be quite a good person to try and help grow it. So yeah, that's why I put myself forward, because I'm very obsessed, obsessed with it. So yeah, I'm very passionate about trying to just grow the women's game, because I feel like it's brought so much good for me in terms of like friendships, life skills, just general well-being, and I want to share that.
And I mean, now that you are president, how have you sort of found, I guess, being president? How have you found some of the highlights, but also dealing with some of the inequalities that you have mentioned and that are present in the game at the moment?
Well, firstly, I've really enjoyed it. I think doing something that I feel so invested in, it's quite rewarding. So all positives. And if I'm going to be stressed about anything, I'd love to be like stressed about just helping like grow women's cricket. So yeah, it's been generally positive, and there hasn't been like too many challenges, but I guess highlights have been everything's been running smoothly so far. New members slowly growing, member by member. Yeah, we had a indoor tournament, and that was pretty successful. Given that the club's so young as well, it's only a couple of years old, so it was set up in like 2018, and I think it's really come on. So I'm quite proud, not of what I've done, but just the fact that, you know, of the previous execs that have contributed, it's come quite far. And yeah, we did well at the indoor tournament. So that was a highlight, and everyone in the exec has done an amazing job so far, working well together. I guess the downside was that after COVID, it was kind of, we didn't have two of our exec positions. So we had to fill those at the start of this academic year. And so we had to juggle those positions, which wasn't ideal. But we've come through it now. we're good now. So yeah, I think that was probably the main challenge.
Yeah.
But in terms of inequalities, obviously men's cricket are a lot bigger. And so it's just about trying to get women's cricket exposure to as many people as possible, and show the world what they're missing out on if they're not playing cricket, basically.
Yeah. And I mean, have you found that as you've been getting that exposure out there, that you are sort of getting more and more people joining? Because obviously, I think that's the issue that every smaller society faces, in that they're sort of everyone's fighting for time, basically, because we've only got so many hours in a day. So have you found that as you've been getting more out there, as it's been getting more recognised, that people are sort of looking to join a bit more? Like there is that appetite there for women's cricket, basically.
Yeah, I'd definitely say there's a growing appetite, because, you know, we interact with other clubs quite a lot, just at social events, like women's football, women's hockey, and they do express interest. Like, oh, I've always wanted to play women's cricket, I'll come along. And, you know, we organise skill swaps to, you know, give people a taste of women's cricket as well. So yeah, I think there is an appetite, and those skill swaps have had quite a high attendance. The exposure is going well, and I think the club's growing, and I think more and more people know about it. It's just about now capitalising on the fact that people know about it and getting members to return and buy membership and just invest their time in the club.
And I guess maybe because there is that whole cricket is a bit more private school based in a way, that when you get to university and it suddenly becomes accessible, everyone's sort of starting off from that level playing field. It's not like some people have played football before, played rugby before. They're sort of coming in at it, and maybe that makes it more accessible, because there's not that perception that some people have a lot more experience than others, because I guess cricket maybe is a bit more niche than some of the other more mainstream sports.
Yeah, I guess that is a positive in a way. The fact that not many people played it means that when you do go and play it, you're surrounded by people of a similar standard. But at the same time, the major drawback of that is the fact that no one has played cricket since they were younger. Well, not no one, that's obviously, I'm being over dramatic. But the proportion of people that have played cricket from school versus the proportion of people who played cricket in football, like you mentioned, is so different. So yeah, that's basically the reason why as a club it's a lot smaller, because it's not taught in schools. Well, it's now being taught in schools now, but that start hasn't affected yet because those kids haven't come to university yet. So it's going to take a couple of years until we feel the effects of all this, the new grassroots programs, the fact that cricket's really being pushed instead of, rounders at school. Like, it's going to take a while to feel that, but it is happening. But yeah, the fact that it's sort of been a very exclusive sport in the past, we're sort of still feeling the effects of that, but not for long.
Yeah.
Hopefully, like things like the 100 and just more coverage will address that, and we'll see more rapid growth in the future, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll talk about that after the break, but just to finish off this section, I mean, how would you sort of encourage other people to get involved in women's cricket? Like, what availability is there as part of the society that they can just, rock up and try it out?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we were really big on is, because obviously cricket is quite an expensive sport, there's a lot of equipment involved, which is expensive in itself. We've managed to spend money on getting a lot more of it. So no one needs to bring equipment when they come to our sessions, which has been super helpful, especially in being inaccessible, in the fact that carrying all that stuff when you're commuting is just another thing in itself. But yeah, we've managed to make it accessible in that way, which is one of the pluses of that. We've got, well, I can tell you all about the sessions. We've got four sessions. We've got training Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. You don't need to bring in the equipment, and like this, we cater for all standards. So we've got people who've been playing like county level since they were young, and then people who've literally just picked up cricket in first year in uni, like me. And the fact that I'm now president, it just shows that like this club is so open to all standards, and it doesn't discriminate in any way on your ability. It's purely just about your passion and how invested you are in it, really. So yeah, I think that answers that question. Yeah. And I mean, we'll just take a quick break now, but after the break we'll come back. We'll talk about just women's cricket in general, what can be done, and sort of how, or maybe what is already being done to help improve exposure for the women's game.
Music.
Welcome back to another week of Psychedemics.
Hello, everybody. You're listening to The Vinny Show.
You are listening to Rockstar.
I'm backstage at Casper. We're starting to go. Hello, guys.
Hello. Sport.
There's a team spirit going on behind it. You're all rooting for each other.
Oh, yeah.
Good shot. Well, that's it. Yeah!
Arts.
I love the idea of popular films being nominated for Oscars.
I just think the style that Marvel has made has just put them way above.
Speech.
You must get to the maths and stats building using 3 different modes of transport.
Oh my god, there's a trolley.
It's really all about educating, networking, and sharing our stories.
I think the SU has a really important role in engaging students with politics.
News.
Good evening and welcome to The Big Decision.
Ben and Larissa tied.
This is your student radio station.
This is Raw 12:51 AM.
And welcome back to Raw 12:51 AM and Raw Sport interviews, this time with Evie Ashton, President of Women's Cricket at Warwick. And we'll sort of move on to women's cricket. So as a sport especially, that has seen quite a rapid rise in growth over the last few years. And I guess we'll start off with one of the main reasons for that, that being the 100. So obviously last summer, there was a new 100 ball tournament, but this time it was a bit different in that it had both men's and women's teams taking part almost simultaneously. I mean, I know that from watching it, obviously it's accessible because it's on the BBC, so it's basically free to watch, and it had the women's element intertwined with the men's element, which I guess it's always been the criticism that men's cricket has had an undue focus on it. How important do you think it was that women's cricket was sort of part of the tournament as a whole and was getting the same amount of exposure as the men's game was?
I personally think it was huge. I think this country has never done a tournament like that before, and the only time I've really seen it elsewhere is in Australia with the BBL and the WBBL, as in the teams are under the same names and same uniform, and they're quite the men and women are quite like sort of under one label. So yeah, I think because this country has done that, it's super important because it will set sort of it will not inspire, encourage other countries to do this sort of thing. I'm hinting at the Indian Premier League and the fact there isn't a women's one, and it needs to happen. So it's important on that front, on a global front. In terms of domestically, the fact that they were double headers, I mean, for younger generations, the game was good because it was a shorter format, shorter games. Kids can go to bed earlier. But I guess on like a more gender inequality level, there was equal prize money, which is quite a big thing. I mean, there wasn't equal pay, which is that's the whole thing. But yeah, it set quite a precedent, and it just put men and women on equal footing. They're both equal in standard, equal sports. They should be seen the same way. There's no gender. It's just cricket.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you say, with the whole being free to air, I think the main important thing about that was the fact that they were receiving the same standard of commentary, same quality of coverage. So both the women and the men were getting good, thorough commentary and like analysis about them, and they were both getting like good camera angles. The women's game was being treated like a cinematic experience, which hasn't been consistently done in the past, which is so important. And because it also means that young kids, young girls especially, they see these women, these athletes on free-to-air TV, and they feel inspired to play cricket, which I didn't have when I was younger. I literally never saw women's cricket on TV at all. I didn't even know women's cricket was a thing. That was partly why I never even asked at school, well, why don't we play cricket? Is because I was like, well, I've never seen it on TV, have I? And I knew the boys across the field play cricket, but I was like, I've never seen it on TV, so why would we do it? You know what I mean? So the 100 sort of has been a good way to deal with that. It's not like a slap solution, we'll deal with it entirely, but it's a good catalyst for change in that sort of way. So yeah, inspiring new generations, gender equality in some ways, but all is very promising. And I think a lot of people's preconceptions were that women's cricket is bad, it's unentertaining, it's unskilled. And I think that myth is completely out the window now. The 100 showed that there's so much talent out there, and it can be just as impressive. It's literally just a power differences and strength differences. The skill is practically the same. So, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think having the games mixed in as well? Because we'll come on to talk about the women's Ashes in the next section. So we've just seen the men's Ashes, seen our abysmal performance, and then we're moving on to the women's Ashes. But do you think that maybe it makes it a bit more of not a lesser showcase, but it's not going to be as covered as much because now the men's Ashes are over? There's almost that excuse from people that don't think it needs to be covered. But with the 100, you had the women's games were immediately before the men's games, so they were both covered. And it kept the tournaments intertwined with one another, and I guess provided that exposure for everyone, as opposed to just one side of the coin.
That is a good point. I mean, there's so many different arguments to this. It's such a complex. There's so many different sides to this argument, whether double headers are the way to go or separate competitions are the way to go. But the point is that in an ideal world, we want women's cricket to be seen good on its own, and it shouldn't need to be placed next to the men to be seen as good, or it shouldn't need their support. There shouldn't be this reliance on the men. It should be seen as good in its own right, entertaining in its own right. It doesn't need the men to help it along. And if anything, actually, the discourse that I've seen on Twitter has been, oh, the men's Ashes was rubbish. I can't wait for the women's. So people are looking forward to the women's Ashes, and I think the 100 did help with that, like you said. Whether double headers make a difference, I'm not sure. I think it's also good because to have, and what I think I'd argue is it's nice to have separate competitions, because the women's game and men's games are so different, but in good ways. Yeah. Like there's probably more tactics not tactics, but the skill level is so much more important in women's, because you can't just, obviously we're not as strong, can't hit it as far. So you could argue that some of the women put a lot more importance on technique, and it's quite interesting to see that. So yeah, I've gone on a tangent again.
It's fine.
But yeah, I guess the point is that I don't think the lack of double headers will impact it at all. I think if it depends on the coverage being right. I think Sky Sports have the rights to it, so if they get it out there, that's what matters. If as many people can watch it, it's about just making it accessible to watch. People want to watch it. The demand is there, because if you think about like the T20 Women's World Cup final in March 2020, that had like 86,000 people plus watching. Like they filled the MCG pretty much. So there is that demand. It's just about, putting it out there and letting people actually watch it instead of just not putting it anywhere. Because, but yeah, I'd say that is the demand for women's cricket in its own right. Double headers are good though, because it's I guess it's just another like variation of cricket. Yeah. And it's nice to see teams mix and not have like a segregation. So there's two sides of the argument, but yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, what do you think the ECB especially can do just to help grow the women's game even further than I guess it's already gone? Because obviously we've gone down that road, but we need to keep going down that road and we need to keep growing it. And I mean, what do you think the ECB can do to help that?
I think one of the most important changes was the women's game becoming professional, I think in 2015 or 2017, fact check. But the introduction of professional contracts was huge, because it meant that players who could play for England and make a living, as they should be able to. Yeah. And obviously players in the 100 were downside was that they were having to have side jobs because the income just wasn't enough. And the same sort of happens now within domestic competitions like the Rachel Hayhoe-Flint Trophy and the Charlotte Edwards Cup. The players they have contracts, but they're not necessarily being paid enough to live on just that income. So what I'd argue for is probably more professional contracts like that, so that it is a career option for women, and increasing in pay so that they don't have to do cricket and a side job, because that only hurts the growth, because they can't train, they can't spend as much time on injuries, and if they've got another job, do you know what I mean? They can't really excel as much as they could. So yeah, professional contracts, more more pay, but I think importantly, grassroots things like cricket in schools, programs for communities that don't have cricket at all, like diversifying the game, so things like that, especially to get kids involved, because it's so much harder to pick up a sport when you're older, because you've got so many other commitments, and you might feel like it's too late. So it's so important that the ECB is doing that. They've got multiple programs at the moment, dealing with that kind of thing. I guess the ECB should probably they probably are looking at ways to deal with the private school. Like the fact that it's just white private school things, ways of dealing with that. I'm not sure what the policies are to deal with that, but getting more state schools to play cricket, setting up programs in communities that haven't got access to it, that should help, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll take another quick break now, and we'll come back for our final segment after the break, where we talk about the upcoming Women's Ashes and a bit on the upcoming Women's Cricket World Cup.
Looking for a bite to eat at the Warwick SU?
Daily specials and fine dining experience at the brand new Canopy.
Karaoke, pub grub and lager on tap at the Dirty Duck.
Salad and sarnies to go in the bread oven.
Or a latte link up at Curiosity.
There's something to suit any taste and any budget.
And if you've got a big night ahead of the Copper Room, start it right at T-Bar.
With speciality cocktails,
best stock prices,
and our expertly stocked bar overlooking the piazza.
At Warwick SU outlets,
there's something to satisfy every taste.
And welcome back to Raw 12:51 a.m. and this Raw Sport interview with Evie Ashton, president of women's cricket at Warwick. And we're just going to be looking at one final part, looking at the upcoming Women's Ashes. So we've had the Men's Ashes, we've had that utter capitulation where it always seemed to not be able to get worse, and then somehow it got worse. But now we've got the Women's Ashes. Surely it can't go much worse than that. But it's got a bit of a different format, Evie, doesn't it? It's not 5 test matches, but something a bit different.
Yeah, so basically, from how I understand, there are going to be 3 T20s. So that's T20 over format cricket starting on this Thursday. Oh my God, on the 20th. Oh, it's so soon. And then that's followed by a test match, which is, I think it's a 5-day one. It might be 4-day one. I need to clarify that. But there's a test match. It's going to be one. And then there's 3 ODIs after that. So it's much more diverse in terms of format. And the cricket we're going to see will be a lot diverse in terms of tactics, strategy, that kind of thing, as opposed to the Men's Ashes, which is just 5 test matches. So, yeah, it's going to be super interesting, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, are we expecting quite a close Ashes? Or we're not looking at England 4-0 loss? Or I guess because it's a point system, isn't it? So we're not looking, let's say, just a thrashing by Australia this time. Oh no,
that's tough, because obviously England are going to be the underdogs because Australia are playing at home. It's their conditions. It's their home stadiums, they're comfortable. And we've come over. I think there's been problems in terms of COVID. I saw an article where family partners had to help warm up, we're bowling in the nets. And so the preparations have been a bit wonky, not as smooth as England would like. But I mean, also, not sure which year it was, but Elise Perry, she is England women's nightmare. I think she took 9 wickets in an ODI, or it might have been a test match. And she's also one of the top run scorers, and ensured in the last Ashes that I think England did not win. It was either the last one or the one before. But yeah, they've got Elise Perry. They've got an incredible Ashes team. But we also have a very strong competitive team. So it's really hard to say. And I don't want to get ahead of myself and say that that England will win. Because I don't think we can make that make that claim. So yeah, I'm optimistic, but not too optimistic.
Okay. Because
we are the underdogs, and preparations haven't been smooth as we'd hope. So yeah.
Yeah, but who will we be looking at to rely on, maybe? Who would we want to be having that good tournament if we want to have a chance at winning?
I mean, the first person that comes to my mind is probably Sophia Dunkley, who she's been amazing in all formats last year. So she made her test debut last year. She also made her ODI debut a few weeks before that, I think, or a few weeks after. And she scored like 74 not out, I think, on ODI debut. Or actually, no, there might have been in the test match. But either way, she did amazing in all formats and the same in the 100. So she's excellent in the shorter and longer formats. So, I mean, she's someone I've got my eye on in terms of being able to make a difference. I mean, there was the T20 series against New Zealand back in September, and she hit the winning runs to secure the series when it really wasn't going England's way. You know, she really, turned the game the other way. So she's someone I've got my eye on. But to be honest, the entire team is very strong. I mean, you've got Captain Heather Knight. She's incredible. Can't fault her. They've got a great list of bowlers to choose from. They've got, they've what's good about this as well is that they've brought an England A team, bringing in uncapped players. So like Izzy Wong, Alice Capsey, Eve Jones. They've brought those players and potentially could use them because they excelled in the 100 as well. So there's a lot, and Lauren Bell. And so they've got so many options, which I think is a plus. And those players have done so well. So they're in form, So I think Tammy Beaumont, who has been nominated for 3 different ICC awards. I think she got nominated for Best Player All Round, Best T20 Player and Best ODI Player. And so we've got Tammy Beaumont, in our Ashes team. And so she's going to be vital in all formats. She scored centuries in a century, I think, in T20 game against New Zealand. So yeah, she's definitely one to watch. But all of them will be fantastic and we'll be hoping to make a difference.
Yeah, and we'll go in, and then obviously 2 months later in March, we've got the Women's World Cup one-day international tournament, delayed for a year, obviously because of COVID. Yeah. I mean, I guess the final question I'd ask is, which would you rather win? Would you rather win the Ashes or the World Cup? Assuming of course, we can't win both.
I would rather win probably the Women's World Cup because of the nostalgia from the 2017 World Cup where Anya Shrubsole got her 6th for. That was such exciting television. Obviously, that might not happen again, but the feelings, like the thrill from that final, I want that to happen again. And because it's more diverse. The Ashes, it's just England versus Australia, same players, same thing. Whereas with the World Cup, you've got different countries all playing against each other, and it's much more competitive. Seeing lots of different players getting involved. So yeah, I'd say the World Cup is probably more prestigious in a way, and in a way it's better for the global game. Like saying that the Ashes is the most important thing is quite a Western, like narrow-minded thing to say. Like it's very just West orientated, whereas the World Cup is bringing in audiences from all around the world. So yeah, I'm more inclined to say Women's World Cup just for those reasons.
Yeah. That is everything that we have discussed, talking about women's cricket at Warwick in the country in general, and obviously the upcoming tournaments, which, I mean, you can make sure to check it out if you can. I think it's on Sky or BT Sport, so obviously not quite as accessible as we'd like it to be, but hopefully England can come out on top in both the Women's Ashes and the Women's World Cup. And thank you for coming on, Evie. Thank you for being a great guest on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on Royal Sport, so thank you.
That's all right. And make sure to check out all of our other Women's Week coverage from all of our other departments. But I've been Will Kingswood, and this has been Raw Sport Interviews with Evie Ashton.